Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark. I am the CEO of Leadershipity, a serial entrepreneur. I am the incoming president of the Entrepreneurs Organization in West Michigan. Just wrote and recently released the book, Leading Winning Teams. Super excited about that, where I feature today's guest, Todd Martin, on page 142 and 143 of that book through a series of interviews that we did prior to the show today, which I'm super excited about this show. And as most people know me, I am a speaker, but they do know me because I spent over 13 years in professional baseball coaching and 3 World Series. Today on the Winners Find a Way show, my special guest, friend, and I'm a colleague with Todd Martin because I serve on his board at the TMYL Foundation, and he is the founder. Todd, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm good, Trent. How are you?
Man, I couldn't be better. Always excited to talk with you one-on-one. We've had some great interview talks about leadership, man, and you have been at the forefront of this since such a young man. You were thrust into the professional tennis environment as a pretty young dude because you were exceptional. Reaching a high rank of 4th in the world in the ATP. You coached Djokovic, one of the best players in the world still today. You've been an Olympian. And of course, you've been involved with the board at the USTA and then even transitioned to the CEO of the International Tennis Hall of Fame. So, man, this tennis environment and part of your world, you're just a Michigan kid gone good for me. That's who you are for me. Another Michigander for all those on Winners Find a Way, because I only find the best. And it turns out a bunch of them are in Michigan.
Well, that's it's all flattering. I'll say that I still am just a Michigan kid. Listening to you, I remember one of my first really good tournaments was the French Open in 1991. I think it was the first time I'd ever been on TV. And Mary Carrillo, who's a famous broadcaster with tennis roots, was talking about an interview that I had done with Mitch Albom. And when Mitch was just writing at the Free Press, long before Tuesdays with Maury and all of his other great books. But I said, I just want to be a normal guy. And Mary, who's a friend, who's become a friend over the years, it was critical of that. And it was really bizarre for me to hear. Much more with the belief that I needed to be aspiring to be special and what have you. At the end of the day, I think I'm pretty comfortable with having been a pretty normal guy with a pretty extraordinary life story to be able to tell.
It is really a cool life story, right? And I think people grab onto it, one, because you and I both know pro sports are a little different than everyone's else view of it, right? Like everyone else views, oh, it's all perfect and you make millions and it's never bad. And you're like, oh, well, hold on, man. Like, and you only work with exceptional people that are never terrible and never tough to work with. Like, oh, that's wrong too. Like, it's and it just continues to circulate that there's a vision of what everybody else thinks it is. And there's a reality of what it really is, right? And you and I both know it's a ton of work, man. I mean, it is a discipline from sun up till sundown. And, from the time, really, I don't even know in pro sports if my life was my own. I kept remember thinking like, man, when you make it to pro sports, you've kind of got your ability to kind of direct how you want to do things. And this really wasn't true, because there was still a framework that had to go, a schedule that had to be kept, and where you had to be and when you were going to be it. And you realized, like, man, I was probably 30 years old when I realized, like, my life's never been really my own, but I chose it and I love it.
Yeah.
But like, I always have to follow this marching machine of an order, because without the order, it doesn't work. I'm just a part of the cog, right?
I think that's right. And my experiences are in an individual sport, but I have to acknowledge friends of mine who played professional team sports and their accounts. I never had the disciplinarian coach that could command to me to do X, Y, or Z more. I had both the luxury and the challenge of hiring those who were to coach me. I was the GM of my own team, and that for me was a benefit. I got to surround myself with the type of people that I wanted to be around, and that I could entrust holding me accountable to what needed to be done in order to be as effective and successful as I could be on the court. The great thing in in professional sports for me is the simplicity of it. Every day I knew exactly what I needed to do. Either who I had to play and the puzzle I needed to solve on the court with that specific player, or when I was traveling, I knew I had to turn the system off for a day. We traveled a ton, 1 day a week, and oftentimes back and forth across oceans. So that drove some of my peers crazy. For me, it was an opportunity to recharge and just shut her down for a day.
Yeah.
Even if I maybe went and got a workout in after the travel day, it still was a fairly mindless, and I welcomed it, break from the rigor, if you will. And then, in my practice sessions or in my practice periods, it was really easy. I need to work on these 3 different things during this, month and a half block of off season, or during this week of a break between tournaments. I miss some of that simplicity still to this day. And yet, in part because that simplicity, oftentimes augmented by the notion that I had great people around me helping me identify what mountains I needed to climb. That simplicity gave me great challenge every day, but gave me great clarity. And most of what I read now in the leadership space, it's how do you provide everybody as much clarity as possible, along with accountability and encouragement and other key facets. But without clarity, my co-founder Rick Furman of TMYL used to say, without clarity, people make stuff up. And I never felt like I had to make stuff up when I was competing.
Man, that's really good. I think you're right. I think we're on an environment right now where it's uncertainty overload. So it's really tough. And I miss that as well about pro sports. Like, this is the focus. This is what we're going for. And we're building alignment very quickly. And it's really not tough to build alignment in a lot of ways. There's challenges with it, but everyone does recognize the end goal, right? It's the championship. It's a trophy. It's another win. Like, there's short-term goals, and it's not tough to convince people what those goals are. In the corporate environment, there's 90 things, and these are the 3 things that we really want to focus on. And everyone wants to argue for the 87 other ones. That's important to them, maybe, but maybe not to the organization. So that becomes more challenging in some of the work environments that I see now post sports. I want to dive into something that I found really interesting, because you're this phenomenal player as a kid. You're coming out of East Lansing, Michigan. You're highly recruited, and you decide Northwestern, where you go get your associate's degree. I know there's a 4-year program there. But like, you do 2 years and you get a call to the tour, like, you can go pro, and you choose that life, right? Like, so you get a couple years of your schooling in. So shout out to all the Northwesterners and your fellow alums. Maybe you'll go back one of these days back to Northwestern. I don't know. So, but if you had to talk, like, let's just jump into 24-year-old Todd, right? You've got a couple years on the tour under your belt. That's a very young general manager. Like, do you look back and think like, man, there's a couple gaps. I didn't know what I didn't know at that time that I probably could have utilized on my team, and I didn't know better. You kind of mentioned that.
Well, first of all, if Northwestern offered associate's degrees, I think there are some professors that would still protest me getting an associate's degree. So yeah, it's a really, Trent, that's a really interesting question. The idea of team build out when I was getting started in 94, I mean, by the time 94 came around, I was established. I was what I would call successful. I'd been in the top 20, if not the top 10 by then. And, it was at the dawn of real sports science. And, I think the young athletes of today would shake their head at the notion of we didn't always do strength and conditioning training while we were in competition. It was an off-season notion.
Yeah.
My most successful peers committed themselves to that in competition and just literally prioritized that strength and conditioning notion 365 days a year, and they were ahead of the game. I was definitely behind the game, or slow to the party, if you will, on that front. If I could change one thing, that would have been it. And along with not only doing it, but embracing it and relishing it. To this day, I don't like going to the gym. I understand it's an important endeavor, but I always was more interested in playing the game and in learning the craft than I was in sort of augmenting my development in these ancillary auxiliary functions. Sports psychology, I partook in at a cursory level until it became an issue, and then I dove in, and that was a really important step for me. I dabble in sports psychology, performance psychology, leadership, and it's amazing how it intersects with leadership coaching. But to this day, that I think, again, with clarity in mind, it clears up one's own mind. The best thing that my first sports psychologist ever said to me is, do not think of me as a shrink or as a psychologist. He said, think of me as an organizer of thought. And he said that totally to disarm me and not feel like I was going to somebody because I was incapable of managing my own mess. And I collapsed on center court at Wimbledon, figuratively, but I was at the finish line and just bonked like crazy, which was why I went and saw the sports psychologist. But when he said organizer of thought, that's the first time I looked at psychology in a meaningful way, in a self-interested way. And, now we talk about controlling the narrative and, sort of jargon, a little bit more 21st century jargon. But at the end of the day, if you can clear up and organize where your thoughts are and what they are, it does clear a really nice path for function.
Yeah, I love this conversation, right? Because and I appreciate you talking about the gap, because here's one thing you don't know about me. right, as a strength and conditioning coach for Coach Saban over at East Lansing in Michigan State, and then going to 2 World Series right after that in 95 and 97 with the Indians. Strength and conditioning was a huge role because we were ahead of other teams. We were physically doing that. And I think before I came in, especially baseball, Todd, at that time, it was a gas tank theory, very similar to what you're saying with athletes. Hey, I'm going to load up in the off season. I'm going to fill the tank. And then it's like, oh, I hope I don't run out of gas. Well, tennis is an extremely physically demanding sport. Besides the fact how physically it becomes because of the mental aspect, which is a whole nother, because fatigue makes cowards of us all, right? And so when we look at that, I think man, I remember thinking to myself, because I constantly watched you, because one of those memories you don't remember is our junior match where I think you beat me 0-1 in about hour and a minute or something, because I remember taking long changeovers so I didn't lose in less than 1 hour, right? So that was one of those things and I was pretty good, man, and you smoked me, right? So okay, so then we go through that. So now fast forward to 97. I just went to my second World Series. And there was a time in my life I wanted to reach out to you and go, Todd, you need a strength coach. I want to be your guy. I swear to God, I thought my wife was like, there's no way you're going on a tour and being gone all the time. We have kids, man, not a chance. And I'm like, dude, these people this thing is becoming so physical. It's changing the game. And like you said, it became a separator at that time because there was a few that really figured it out early. They were already pretty good, by the way. They were already great players. And then they capitalized that on inside their camps. And it became a separator at that level when it really first entered some sports.
Well, I mean, you're talking with all professional sports, you're talking about such just very fine differences in performance in order to determine what a result is. I mean, if we just go into sort of the the gross athletic talents of my peer group, then I was in the 1 percentile. From a explosivity, agility, all of that. But I made up for that shortcoming or those shortcomings other ways. In some ways, rather than tackling those shortcomings head on and saying, sure, I'm always going to be the slowest guy on the tour. I understood that. But when I was the fastest and most agile I could be is when I competed the most successfully. 6'6", long limbs, naturally injury prone to a degree. The better I was in my strength and conditioning, the more resilient I was to those sort of niggling injuries. And at the same time, the guys who had a little trouble upstairs processing wins and losses and the rigor of a 35-week a year travel regimen, they could have benefited from some other services that I didn't necessarily need. But you have to, when you have these micro separators, you have to just strive to plug those holes. And now sports has become so professionalized. If there's one thing I could argue, it's they're creating holes to plug that don't exist. And so sometimes there's just too much in the system.
Yeah, we've lost that clarity. We've lost a little bit of the focus. There's too much going on, little overwhelm. Yeah. I see that. I think we should have labeled you maybe the Larry Bird of tennis back in the day, because everyone thought Larry couldn't compete, a little slower, little this, and then Larry went fine. Like Larry did just fine. And I'm thinking like, hey man, you're an Olympian, you're number 4 in the world. I mean, top 10 puts you on any starting all-star game in any NBA game ever, right? And so it's like, I think you're kind of the Larry Bird of tennis, Todd. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, listen, I'd be happy to go shoot baskets with him. I'm pretty confident in my 3-point range. However, I will say it's interesting the context in which you mentioned that. I've never looked at it this way, but how much do you hear athletes talk about when they're really good, when they're right on or close to the zone or in the zone? They talk about everything slowing down.
Yeah.
Everything slowing down. And when you watch Bird highlights, it looks like the game slows down to his speed. And maybe that's just the way he saw the way he saw the sport. And and you watch like Doncic and Jokic, like these guys make slow look fast. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. Now let's talk about one thing most people don't know about you. All right. When Todd's not busy running an operation, playing some tennis, running the foundation, helping there, you're in the pool hall, man. Like you're a pool player. And, I said, like, listen, Minnesota Fats has got nothing on Todd Martin. I thought maybe, we transfer you to Michigan Fats. I don't know. But like, how good really are you at playing pool?
I am. That was not the question I wanted to be asked. I am. I would say I'm very good. I am best at playing pool, other than playing tennis in my life. I would say I'm in golf terms, I'm a scratch or better pool player.
Okay, but in fairness, level of tennis was, the percent of a percent. Level of pool is good, but let's not put it. There's a lot of minus. A lot of plus handicappers out there that are.
But I'm still getting better at pool, and I'm only getting worse at tennis. So I absolutely adore competing still.
Yeah.
I will. I mean, if there's a game to play, a puzzle to do, I will sit down and I'll get after it. And so the pool's been really fun for me. I've just reconnected with it after 20 years or so, where I didn't while our kids were young. And but it was something I did when I was in my 20s, and I love doing it.
Yeah. Married guy now, 3 kids, 22, 19, 16. You've been out there doing it. You're in the prime, man. Like it's all happening right now, man. The last one out there to uni, and then who knows what's next for you and mama, but
tuition payments. That's what's next.
Second mortgages
next. Next.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into TMYL, man. I mean, 30 plus years on the Todd Martin Youth Leadership Organization. It is but I want to preface this is really important, because as a board member now for I think 3 years with TMYL, no offense to you, because you and Rick Furman were the mind trust behind this, looking at the community in your hometown, but the organization's really just in namesake only to Todd Martin Youth Leader. In fact, we don't even use it anymore. We really use TMYL as the proponent. And that's some unselfish leadership by you, but it's also community driven by your team. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, our vision, when I had just turned 23, I'd just come back from Wimbledon, and I had a really good, my first really successful 6 months. So I went from like 100 in the world to top 15 after Wimbledon. And Rick, who did a great job of planting ideas in my head, pulled me aside, and we had a great chat. and nobody other than my parents and my wife have ever known me, and my sister have ever known me as well as Rick. And he said, it's a great opportunity to give back. There's momentum in your brand, so forth. And we started talking about it, and he said, and this is, if I could be critical, it was too early to start. But he and I had the conversation about three things that meant the world to me. One was the sport. Two were children. I had wanted to be a kindergarten teacher until I ultimately went and played tennis. And then the community of Lansing. I moved to East Lansing when I was 10, and it was the end of the world for like the first 3 days. And then from that moment on, it was the greatest thing I could have ever hoped for. And he told me about this program that Arthur Ashe and some of his colleagues had founded 50 years, or well, now more than 50 years ago. And he said, we can do that here. There's a lot of need in the community, and we just sort of got going. And it was, Rick was a doer of doers of doers. And my father was a corporate attorney, so he could, sort of put the ducks in a row in support. And, before you know it, we had a couple of young guys willing to operate program out of the trunks of their car at public courts in Lansing, and had a sort of a vague relationship with Parks and Rec, and it worked. But it all just started with, let's get tennis rackets in hands. Let's give the kids something constructive to do in the summer, and let's provide them some role modeling from young adults. And from there, we identified, a few hours worth of camp a day in the summers. We're just at the tip of the iceberg as far as serving a need. Then we started to understand that, we need to probably do a little bit more in the realm of service and helping the kids grow in understanding of the world. So we started a leadership curriculum, and now we're, we've been for a long time now. We've been full year round. We've evolved from tennis and leadership to really tennis leadership and academic support. Our kids are growing. 27, I think 27% in 2024 grew or advanced more than 2 years or 2 grade levels in their reading. 55% grew more than their grade level in reading and math together. So we're having huge impact and serving greater and greater numbers of youth. All of that, I think last year about 2,300 children were served. All of that comes from the notion that if this is, if I could go back 30 years ago, I would not have named the organization Todd Martin. It would have been much more focused on community and what we do. The fact that it was named ambiguously in certain ways, it's the original name was Todd Martin Development Fund before Todd Martin Youth Leadership. We're due for another rebrand, and that one will, if I have anything to say about it, will not include my name. It will be much more about Lansing and the services that we render. But as we've evolved, it's demonstrated how important it is for the community to own these types of organizations. I never once lived in Lansing from the time that we founded TMYL. And for years, I was telling the organization, the executive director, I want this to be owned by Lansing. I don't want this to be about me. And part of that was selfish. Part of that was, I can't be the fundraising mechanism, both from a time and logistics standpoint, but also from a fundraising value. I'm not a household name. I don't walk off the airport tarmac and start, money just doesn't pour in because it's my name. So it's in conjunction with all of that thinking, our programming has improved at such a level where we're accessing different sources of money, grant money, and far greater support, really, really dynamic support from Parks and Rec. And these are products of an iterative process, probably, and but with an idea that, and I said this to you earlier, an evolved vision. The vision was very basic when we got started. The vision now is how do we take a community like Lansing, Michigan, that has sort of towed the line of depressed for a long time now, and how do we make an indelible imprint on the youth and therefore the future of the community?
Yeah, I love this evolved vision. I mean, I think about back in the day when you started, you and Rick got an idea. You have a board yet. I mean, you got like, hey, here's me, Rick, a couple guys. Now you got a board of 20. You have a budget, a revenue stream of probably, 10x what you started at or more. And doing just hundreds of children are impacted annually because of TMYL. I mean, you got to be pretty proud of the 30-year iteration.
Yeah, it's one of those. Yeah, it's a great lesson in leadership in its own right. I am remarkably proud. However, I also have had remarkably little to do with the success of the organization. We started because Rick was just a thorn in my side and said, we got to do something. And he and my dad they've both passed now, were co-founders of mine, but I was the follower of the three. It was either Rick was leading me towards vision, or my dad was leading me towards understanding how the ducks were going to be in a row. I've spent anywhere from probably a couple of weeks of my year to now, 5 days plus a handful of board meetings a year. Thank God for Zoom and being able to do it remotely with the program. And when we talk about leadership, oftentimes we talk about it being lonely, and I think that that level of disconnection from the work that really is transformative is or transformational in people's lives is something I've grown accepting or comfortable with. But I do, I envy both the granular contact with the program that our staff have in Lansing, and I also marvel at it because although I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher, I don't know if I could have done this. I mean, like
Yeah.
it's a heavy lift. it's a heavy lift, both in labor, but in weight. I mean, in the issues that they have to address on a daily basis. The father of, I think, 7 or 9 kids passed away unexpectedly a couple of years ago. And these are young, I mean, young kids, and a mother who's already overstretched is now responsible for all of them. And our program executive director, Rebecca, fortunately, just, fortunately, she has a social work background, and dove headfirst in to figure out how the organization could be supportive of this family beyond normal. And so yes, it's a great source of pride. But it's also understanding fully who deserves the credit, which is one of the great things about leadership, is assigning credit to those who deserve it.
Sure. Well, I think, as we've seen, I think it's still an evolving vision, right? I mean, I think that
Sure.
the same challenges of man, let me do some quick math of 30 years ago, bro. 1995, right? Are not the same challenges of the kids today, right? You and I grew up in 85. This is when we were coming through the whole program, and we had different challenges even a decade before that, right? So it has to evolve with that too. The new family dynamic, the new challenges that are going on. What we love is we love the resources, right? There's courts, and we're utilizing tennis courts, and there are resources. You've got a clear connection to Lansing growing up, and then you have a clear connection to Chicago. Let's talk about the upcoming big fundraiser, because we're going to be there in just a few days from now. We're going to be descending on Chicago and have our little event there, as we do an annual event, which is year what now there, Todd?
Oh, we've been, we had a couple of board members 12 years ago, maybe, with the vision of leveraging the my Chicago connections from Northwestern, their Chicago connections. They're both executives in Chicago at the time. And a really good concept of understanding that Chicago is the hub of the Midwest, and so many Lansingites end up there. We're really developing, in some ways, Chicago's future citizens by what we're doing in Lansing, and the networks that we have in Chicago have been remarkably supportive. This is a great outing for us. We'll be at East Bank Club in downtown Chicago Thursday, Friday, and I'll be there a little bit Saturday morning this week. Thursday night at 6:30, we're having a reception, which will be the core bit of fundraising. I'll be on the court for what looks to be 24 hours a day, both days, Thursday and Friday, which is a lot for my my orthopedic estate. But it's a great way to reconnect. It's a great way. It's referred to as our Chicago celebration. It's a great way to celebrate the successes of our youth. We're bringing a couple of the families down with us, so the kids will get to speak and meet people who are supportive from a distance, and hopefully they'll be able to understand how unique that is, that people's philanthropy spreads outside of their own community. Mm-hmm. But it's a treat for me. East Bank Club has been amazing. Mel Kleist, their CEO, and Tom Wenglin, who's the director of rackets, and then Rob Black, who's a high school tennis teammate of mine, and
mine in college too, by the way. One of my college teammates, yeah.
And one of their professionals at East Bank. It's a lot of fun, and a great way to reconnect with some people who wear purple a lot in their daily gigs.
Yeah, it's a yeah, and I think another addition, your Chicago contact, obviously from Northwestern, but you've got a number of USTA members that you were on the board and served on there, and they were support also of the Tennis Hall of Fame with you. So that's just a lot of good spirited folks. I know I've reached into the entrepreneur community in the EO Entrepreneurs Organization and YPO Young Presidents Organization, of the founders and presidents there to hopefully wrangle their support as we continue to grow into Chicago, because, philanthropy is definitely something we want to start in our neighborhoods. But this program is probably going to grow, and it probably could, one of the evolve visions may be the fact that this grows outside of Lansing and can be duplicated into other cultures and climates and cities. And so we're super excited about that potential, as well as just seeing the fact that how much this gives. And these two families that are going to get to come down, like, have never been to Chicago. This is like coming out of a neighborhood that they don't get to see every day and see the big city and go see it. East Bank is such a great host. So it's going to be super awesome and exciting. It'll be a great time. And hopefully, your body holds up for a couple of court days,
Listen, I've got all the Aleve and Advil I could possibly need, so I should be okay.
Good, nice shout out right there for them. Yeah, so let's kind of close up some things. A couple things that you talk about. In my book, one of the quotes I pulled out. One thing you learn from starting new things, venturing out of your comfort zone. This was one of those things, out of your comfort zone as a 23-year-old, but you're following your lead by these two men that are so influential in your life. Once you start, you're 50% done. And that doesn't always work out to be exactly right. But the anxiety of doing something different or a large project that's in front of you is really and truly where the anxiety becomes the biggest hurdle that you have to clear. I remember you telling me that in an interview. And for a lot of people who are kind of sitting on their hands like, hey, how do I take an action? How do I go out? Like, sometimes it's just, you got to go out there and find a way. And winners find a way. We talk about this all the time, Todd, on the show. But I love the quote: winners, when shown data that they're losing, find a way to win. We studied that in our sports, right? Tennis and baseball and hockey and all the things we were doing. Like, man, there's plenty of indicators when you're down 4-0, like, hey, listen, things aren't going exactly right. I've got to do something a little different. Adjustments have to be made immediately, or else this is not going to be a good result. Fortunately, we have time, because at 4-0, there's so long match left. But when you hear someone challenged with that about, not getting off the sofa, not getting up out of bed, moving into something they really are passionate about, what do you tell them?
Well, that's a Rick, that 50%, once you start, you're 50% done, is a Rick Furman quote.
Nice.
And he said it with purpose to me, because I was hesitant. I mean, I embodied the reason somebody came up with the saying, perfect is the enemy of good. Mm-hmm. If we want to be effective, we have to take action. There's just no other way. And that action might be grabbing a shovel and starting to dig ground. That action might be calling up somebody who you don't know, somebody you do know, somebody that you need help from. But you have to take action. And I equate it to writing. I didn't write well when I was growing up, but the teacher taught me to create an outline and then write a rough draft or a thesis sentence, right? And then a rough draft, and then refine that draft. And then finally, let's pay the piper and see what the result is. Essentially, that's what life is. It's, hey, I've never done this before. Let's create some modest process that I can imagine being digestible, right? You don't have to build out a 40-page action, an action list in order to do something. And where I've benefited is being humble enough to say, this is what I did, get feedback, critical feedback, and say, well, you didn't answer this question. I'm not certain about the effectiveness of this tactic. So then I go back and say, all right, I got my rough draft back from the teacher. Now let's refine it and let's give it a whirl. And that, Trent, I find that works on the big stuff, taking jobs that you don't know how to do or have never done like work before, starting a foundation, leaving college and trying to play tennis professionally. But it's also helped in that notion of, I've never written a grant request before. How do I do it? What information do I need? You just sort of, eventually roll up your sleeves, dive in, be willing to bleed and get dirty, and then also understand that it's not going to be the end of the world. Way easier to preach than it is to practice.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that kind of comes out to me, I always think about, hey, I want the right answers. I may have to work harder at finding out what are the right questions I should be asking, because it's okay if I don't know how to execute yet. But if I'm even executing in the wrong angle when I don't even know, but I think like, hey, I'm operating alone on what Trent thinks is best, probably never a good place for me to be. I end up on an island, usually alone, where Trent thinks is best, right? So, I mean, one of the things I want to kind of chat about when you talk about community development, a fellow friend of ours who's now making an impact in TMYL. I coached with Gene Orlando at Michigan State. Gino was the head tennis coach. I also played against Gino's teams when I was playing at Toledo, and he was the head coach at Bowling Green. And now, are you surprised? Were you shocked by when you started this and started sharing your vision? I think people came along because they adored you. They saw your leadership, but a lot of people came on with a willingness to take action in a place where you were taking action. And did that surprise you of how many people want to do it? Because we have a really big board now who are happy to give and share. Did that surprise you?
That doesn't surprise me. I think we all have in us this burn to do things with purpose. And my parents were great in the community service space and philanthropy space, but I do feel like we have, especially when it comes to health services and youth services, I think we all have a passion to make sure, and we can see the benefit of our work. So I love that when Coach Orlando decides to invest so much of his time with TMYL after retiring from coaching the Spartans for 25 years or so.
Yeah.
That I think that is unique. That is different. That's just a human being who's really and truly called to service. And he is a product of a program not dissimilar to ours, where he grew up. That stuff is just utterly inspiring, because he's poured his heart into everything he's ever done, and sets an amazing example for all of us with those types of efforts.
Last question. We got to go. And but victory. Winners find a way. So when you think of people that are, hey, I'm trying to figure out victory and what that looks like for me, and someone who's saying like, hey, I want to win, and we define success very differently and what winning looks like. If you were to talk to someone and they were looking like, hey, Todd, I want to win. You became a winner. What is it the first thing I need to do to really start taking on victory in my life?
detach yourself from that notion.
Result.
Yeah, I mean, victory has a result. I mean, it is a result, and those who focus on the result will get a result, and it usually will not be the result that they aspire to. The result is a worthy goal, but you have to understand that there's a process that must be focused on in order to achieve that result. So yes, identify what the desired result is, but then identify and focus on what the process that is and needs to be taken in order to achieve that. So I didn't just aspire to be a great tennis player playing at Wimbledon. I understood that in order to get there, I understood because coach told me, perhaps, but I understood that my forehand had to get better. I had to end up at the net more. I had to work on some technical things in this part of my game or others. I had to do more strength and conditioning work, and also nurture the spirit within me on the sports psychology front in order to compete effectively. When I did all that well, I didn't do it with the result in mind. I did it because that I trusted would get me better. And if I got better, I trusted that the result would come in turn.
Nice. The journey, man. The journey. If everyone can engage in that journey along the way. And I mean, it's hard looking back. I mean, I think I missed parts of that journey, focused in on results only, right? And sources of frustration for sure as a young man.
Yeah.
Well, for everybody, hey, thank you for joining us on the Winners Find a Way show. I'm your host, Trent Clark. My special guest today, Todd Martin, former ATP number 4 in the world. He is the founder of the TMYL Foundation, and super excited to be in Chicago with him this week as we have our Chicago launch. Be there Thursday. Tickets are still available. Make a donation, TMYL.org, and you can also buy tickets there. Love to check out my book, Leading Winning Teams. Pick it up. It's available in all the formats, hard copy, ebook, audio, the whole thing. So check it out. And for next time, Winners Find a Way is on every Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific, live. And our show on all the podcast drops every Friday morning. And if you want to know more about Todd Martin, you either join and get part of the foundation, or you better check out your local pool hall, and you can find him maybe catching up right there. All right. Yeah. Until next time, we will see you. Winners Find a Way.
Thanks, Trent.